All right, let's bring in our guest this week here on Inside Boxing Live. If you're a boxing fan, you know the name, you know the voice. Steven Espinoza, the president of Showtime Sports. Showtime just rolled out their spring/early summer schedule. Some bangers in there, some really good fights. We'll get to that and so much more. But Steven, I appreciate you taking some time to come on. I see the Freedom Tower in the background. Love that shot. Looks great. How's everything going?
It's great. Pleasure to be with you.
Yeah, it's a nice sunny day in New York. The boxing schedule is heating up. The weather is heating up in New York. As we know, March isn't the biggest month for boxing because of, March Madness. And I know you likened that rollout to a Selection Sunday, which it kind of did get that vibe a little bit. I had my bracket out going through that. But,
right.
Boxing schedule heating up. Showtime schedule, I think, is a great complement to what is already a really good boxing schedule. I think that you can make the point that, all schedules need to be strong. It's a good for the sport. It's not just one against the other. All those different platforms. I think if everyone puts out their best product, we're going to get the best overall product, which is ultimately good for the consumer, right?
Yeah, and I think part of it as well is, and I'm saying this really for the good of the sport, not just sort of self-congratulate. I really wish more networks, more promoters would do the work to set. To go a little bit further in the future. I know as well as anybody, I'm well aware it's a pain. It is incredibly time consuming, and inevitably stuff leaks out. So it never stays a complete secret. But the reality is, I think there's a lot of benefit, chiefly sort of the visibility into the sport and a feeling of organization and cohesiveness, and the fact that this isn't just a random collection of fights that pop up once or twice a month, that this is a sport. It is organized. These fights do relate to each other, and we should give people some visibility and predictability here.
Absolutely. Put it all in one place, get everyone see it. I put the schedule out every once in a while, get fans excited on Twitter, get so many hits because fans just want to see it all in one place. There's a lot going on in the sports world, a lot going on in the world. So if you can condense it, you do a rollout. One of the coolest events I've been to in recent was in 2018 when you guys had your big rollout in New York City. A big red carpet event. We had food, we had all the fighters in one place. Obviously, that's harder to do with COVID, and that was super impressive. Think about it, getting all those fighters in one room. I was in awe of that.
Somebody circulated the picture again this past week when we announced it, and it was the first time I looked at it, and I thought, that is an impressive, not just getting all those fighters there with their belts, dressed up. It was an impressive collection of really the best of the sport.
And who can forget that was the infamous Caleb from Barstool was going around. He was asking. I was set up next to him, Steven. So he asked Wilder, like, "Who are you?" And Wilder was so angry. And then all these fighters were going from Caleb, who does phenomenal stuff for Barstool. They were going from Caleb to me, and they were just so angry coming to me. So they were either just still angry or they were just very willing to be asked like a normal boxing.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. But that was a good event. But the Showtime rollout, we just had it. We got 9 marquee events, 21 undefeated fighters, 2 world championship unification bouts, 7 world championship matches. It starts March 26th with Tim Tszyu and Terrell Gaucher. We got Erickson Lubin on the card. That's going to be a banger. There's these, obviously, we love the big ones. We love the Spences. We love the Ugases. We love Tank Davis. I get excited for those Lubin versus Fundoras or the Stephen Fulton Jr.'s versus Danny Roman, which, as you just talked about, fights that did leak out. That was one that didn't really trickle out. But overall, great rollout. Your thoughts on all that and some of the fights that you're looking forward to, because I know you're a fight fan.
Yeah, I mean, the reality, we were trying to do 3 things here. Number one was roll out a consistent schedule of high quality, even matchups among top tier fighters. So, not just big names, not just 50-50 fights, but 50-50 fights from elite fighters. That's one element. The other element the second element is trying to provide quality throughout the card. And that means, you're not going to have huge names opening the card, but good matchups and meaningful fights.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry.
Yeah. And then the third thing is, really, and this is, I think, one of the things that's almost unique to boxing fans. Boxing fans love discovering the next guy or the next next. So looking in bringing in the Yoelvis Gomez, types, the Kevin Salgados, the Elvis Rodriguez's, who may not be household names in every boxing household, but this is a preview of some talented young guys who may become something in the future.
Yeah, you shine that light on them, whether it's with Showbox and getting them up the ranks. And I know Boots Ennis is like no longer that name, but he's almost like the hardcore fan knows him. I had Dame Lillard on the show, and that was his guy. I'm like, he says he loves boxing because he likes to find the next up and coming star. Boots Ennis, I would say still in that, like maybe on the fringe of becoming like a future champ, still kind of unknown, but he is going to be part of the Showtime family for even longer now. That's exciting. When he fights Castillo Clayton, I believe that is May 14th, correct?
That's right. That's, that's almost undoubtedly, even though we don't have the schedule, obviously, for the second half of the year. It's hard to get it's going to be really hard, probably impossible to top the May 14th card for a Showtime fight. Yeah. With an undisputed 154-pound title fight, the rematch of Jermell Charlo and Castaño, and then the co-feature with Boots Ennis in Castillo Clayton. That's, whatever the third fight is going to be, and we'll work on it. That right there, that's our best card of the year on Showtime.
Yeah, it is. That's a really, really good card. Castillo Clayton can fight. I covered a bunch of his fights on the Broadway boxing circuit. He can fight. He was a guy who was highly ranked. I think he's a good litmus test. I thought he, could have beaten Sergey Lipinets. I mean, you saw what Boots did to Lipinets, and yeah, I like that card. Obviously, Charlo and Castaño. That was one of my top three best or favorite fights of 2021. I love the fights where it's volume, which is Castaño throws 90 punches around, versus power. And Charlo throws the least punches around at 154. Obviously, I'm a stats guy, but I love stuff like that. So to run that back and for it to be on regular Showtime in this, I know I got a lot of questions from fans. We'll get to those in a little bit on what goes on pay-per-view. Now, the Zone's rolling out pay-per-view. This Fox seems hell-bent on pay-per-views. The fact that a lot of these fights are going to be on regular Showtime is a big plus.
Yeah, that's it. And look, there are certain realities. We don't really have an incentive. There's not a pot of gold in the rainbow for us as the network on pay-per-view. Our bread and butter, our business is the Showtime subscription. So our incentive to put as much on Showtime as we can. That's not always possible, just given the financial realities of what it takes to make some fights happen. Some fights are not going to happen without the money from pay-per-view. But where at all possible, we try to put everything on Showtime as much as we can.
Now, there was one part of the Zoom rollout that I missed. There's going to be I think it's the first that Showtime's doing this in a while, or maybe ever, is putting some fights on Showtime before a pay-per-view. Can you fill me in on that?
Yeah, I don't recall that we've done that. We've certainly done some streaming undercard fights. We've done extreme at times. This one was sort of, we have an embarrassment of riches. We had, I don't even want to call them sort of, prelim fights or undercard fights, because, that two-fight card, the two fights that we announced there, Budiev and Stanionis and Brandon Lee, Zach Ochoa, that's a Saturday night championship card.
Damn right.
That is, and that we're going to get, that two-fight card along with the pay-per-view preview leading into the pay-per-view.
Wow.
So call it like, 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific, a really good two-fight card on Showtime and on other platforms. And it's simply because we have, those fights deserve to be on TV. Those aren't prelim fights. Those aren't undercard fights. Those are just high-quality fights and high-quality fighters.
It's the pregame. It's the pregame show. It's like in college, you pregame before you go out. You pregame with two really good fights. One of them, that Stanonius one in Budiev has a lot of implications too, and of course the other as well. I mean, that's really good stuff. But let's get into the fun questions. Let's get into the questions.
Yeah, let's go there. saw your social media. I'm ready for the tough questions.
We'll get to the fan questions. I know you love
Uh-huh.
social media. I know you're one of the rare executives that's you're in the trenches. You're on social media. I want to know what your drafts look like. I see what you send out. What do the drafts look like?
The drafts are a lot more interesting. And it depends on my particular mood. Sometimes there's some ones that go out that probably should have stayed in drafts. Yeah. But the ones that actually stay in drafts, those ones are fire.
I go through my drafts and I'm like, what was I thinking here? Thank God I didn't send that out. You don't want to piss off too many. You got to walk, especially me. I'm like independent media. I got to walk a tightrope. I want to keep everyone happy. I want to keep every promoter happy. I want to keep every network happy. I want to keep the fans happy, which is, they already made their mind up on me and where I stand, which is hilarious. But I mean, we'll get to the fan questions, but I have a question here. Obviously you read the tea leaves here. Fox is going heavy towards pay-per-view. They're doing less and less of these fight nights, which they originally intended to do when they teamed up with the PBC, I believe in late 2018. You're talking about putting fights on before pay-per-views. Obviously, Showtime is a sister network of CBS. Can we potentially see CBS pick up some of the slack here? Is there any discussions with that? What's the latest with maybe seeing some? Because there's only so many dates that Showtime could have.
Yeah, that's very true. And part of the challenge there is, CBS as the most watched network has a lot of, a really busy, sports schedule and really valuable primetime schedule. So those spots are really at a premium. Mm-hmm. It's tough for me to go to them and be able to say, look, let's put this on CBS unless it's something, really, really high quality, really, really valuable, because regardless, no matter what time slot it is, it's going to be displacing something which is really valuable to CBS network. So, I think there are ways around it. There's certainly a lot of platforms between CBS Sports Network and Paramount Plus and Showtime streaming and Showtime. So, the good thing is there's been no shortage of support from CBS, whether it's, in NFL. Saw a lot of that for the Canelo fight. We've seen a lot of marketing support across the company. So, whether or not we put fights on CBS and how frequently we do so, we will get a lot of support from the corporation across all of Viacom. Okay, so there has been thoughts of it. I mean, sure. Okay, that's good. I think fans, they want to know what's next. They kind of see, like I said, read the tea leaves, see what's going on with Fox and who can pick up the slack in this PBC, umbrella, because there's a lot of fighters. There's a lot of fighters on that umbrella. I know Al Heyman he's never had a problem finding a network. How about a question? There's a good jumping off point. How much do you interact with Al Heyman? Give us a fun fact on Al Heyman. I met him once, and it was like I saw Bigfoot. Yeah. Look, people, multiple times a day is the short answer. Multiple calls a day, especially in a process like this. I made the analogy during the stream to setting up the NCAA tournament bracket, and I was half joking, but it's a little bit like that. It's a lot of mix and match of this fighter and that fighter and this date and this venue and that fighter isn't available. This venue isn't available. So it is a really time consuming process, which, some days we're talking probably 10 or 12 times a day. Wow. But, he grew up grew up sort of business wise in the music business. And I think a lot of people there's a certain segment of the boxing that is suspicious of him because he isn't front and center and he doesn't do interviews and he doesn't speak regularly. And that is nothing other than sort of how he was sort of indoctrinated into the industry by his own mentors. And in the music industry, he's explained to me, look, the promoter, the representative, the manager, they're never the story. They never should be the story, because every drop of ink that is written about a manager or a promoter or an advisor is ink that could have gone to the artist. So it's an old school, it's a refreshing attitude. And he's saying, like, look, don't write about me. Don't talk about me. Talk about the fighters. Those are the guys you should be focusing on. Yeah, for sure. And there are pros and cons to
not being in the forefront and not, staying in the back. There are a lot of promoters that like to be all up in the videos, like to quote a famous moment. But it's interesting. I get asked about him a lot, Al Heyman, and he's an interesting character. I would love to listen to some of those conversations, man. 12 conversations a day. I mean, I'm curious about that. I think fans are too. It's like, he has, it's almost like this baseball. I'm a big baseball fan, like this baseball, the lockout we just witnessed, like the commissioner works for the owners, the players. Tony Clark, the head of the MLBPA, works for the players. Like, you represent Showtime, Al represents his fighters. So I'm sure like every conversation isn't, peaches and cream. I'm sure there's a little bit of pushback, like, hey, we want better matchups. We want this guy to fight this guy. I know, because you have to, for your audience, right?
Absolutely. And there've been times they've been servicing multiple networks. We want all the good fights. Other networks want, good fights too. So whether it's, specific fighters or, there is, like in any business relationship, there's a back and forth. And there are objectives. There are things that he wants to get done. There are things that I want to get done. A lot of times those are the same things, but often they're not.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's a nice way to put it. But I'm sure there were a lot of conversations, about this Charlo Munguia. I would label it as a debacle. I would label it as for you, it probably gave some late nights, but I'll try to keep it real. Like, I was a little disappointed to see Charlo and Sulecki. I don't think it could end up being a great fight. I mean, that's why they fight the fights. I think we've learned that. But to go from, oh wow, we're gonna get Charlo Munguia, that's a can't miss fight, or maybe Charlo versus an Adames, or Charlo versus a Lara. How did it settle on Sulecki?
Well, the reality is, it's trying to get the best available fight that we can, and for Jamal, there's a waiting game, and, wanted to be in the, in the Canelo discussions, and he certainly was, and then Canelo went a different way. And then it seemed like we were able to come in with a good save on Munguia. And then, the question then, as soon as it became apparent that Munguia was looking like it was a remote possibility, then you literally take out the top 10 rankings. I like to look at Transnational Boxing Ratings Board.
Yeah, they're good.
Just because, it's sort of the power, the wisdom of the crowd, so to speak, and looking there and saying, okay, well, let's see, this is the consensus on, top 10 fighters. Who else on this list is available and willing to take the fight? And Sulecki, admittedly isn't the sexiest name, but he's a solid veteran, having gone, the distance distance with the best in the division already. So I think he is, is it going to generate as much excitement as some of the other ones? Probably not. Is it a perfectly credible fight and in a good matchup against one of the top guys in the division versus another top, probably 7 or 8 guy in the division? That's exactly what it is. So I get it. Fans were very excited about either Canelo or Munguia, but objectively, that's a good, credible fight for it.
I do feel for Jamal. I do. When it came out that Munguia and Jamal both agreed to terms, and I'm glad you pointed that out on the Zoom call, and I'm glad that leaked out too, is because it's very rarely the fighters that don't want to fight. They're not ducking. These guys fight for a living. They want the smoke, especially Jamal Charlo, a guy who's in his early 30s, going from almost getting a Canelo fight. So let me go for my second best option is Munguia. So hopefully that can be reconsidered. Hopefully that can be revisited, I should say, for the second half of 2021. But, was Lara floated? Was Adames floated? Those are a lot of the names that were being pushed to me on social media.
Yeah, I mean, look, I don't, Lara, not really, to be completely honest. That was not a name that came up. He's a lesser active guy, still a really skilled guy, but that was not someone who came up. Adames was a possibility, and there's some question about his, what timetable he would be ready on, among other things. And, at a certain point, you just sort of, you go into this has been such sort of a painful process that, we wanted something, to lock something in and be able to announce it. So that was the quickest, most credible fight that we could make.
Mm-hmm.
And, you've known, I've said it publicly many times, I'm not a huge fan about talking about negotiations and giving minute day by day, and saying, look, tomorrow this or next week that, or, we're working on this. I think this was an exception, for one specific reason. Charlo is, and both Charlos are polarizing characters. They're, very talented fighters. They're big personalities, and they generate a fair amount of criticism, a fair amount of support as well. But, they have strong reactions. And I think sometimes, fans see a fight and it's not the one that they wanted. And they assume that nothing's happening behind the scenes to make those things happen.
Right.
Here, you literally could not have asked, Charlo and TGB and PBC to have done anything more than what they did. They chased, one of the best guys, if not the best guy in the sport. Didn't go their way. Then they went to, another top 5 guy in there, in the division.
Mm-hmm.
And it really felt like we all bent over backwards. It was a very generous offer. It would have been, I believe that Munguia would have made a multiple of the highest purse that he had made before, and he would have gotten a full world title shot.
Yeah.
So, I think we did everything right. We even, came up with a solution for the competing platforms, and, a situation where, in a second fight, that could go to the platform of Munguia's choice.
Mm-hmm.
But it wasn't enough. So, I think, all in all, I'm completely happy with Select. We did everything we can to get guys who are higher up in the rankings,
mm-hmm.
But it didn't happen. And he's solidly a top 10 guy in the division. I think we'll give him a good, credible fight. I mean, he's a guy who has only got 2 losses, both by decision, one to Jacobs, one to Andre.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a good, credible, solid resume.
Yeah, well, if it means anything, the court of public opinion certainly has taken one side, and it's your guy's side, and stuff is leaking out, and it's no secret that Jaime Munguia has a lot of cooks in the kitchen when it comes to decision makers. And that's the one thing I always say. It's like I think we're living in the golden era of watching fights. We have so much access. We got 4 different platforms. We got fights streamed, great streams that you have to pay for around the world. But sometimes those, exclusivity, these networks are tied to fighters. It's a gift and a curse, and it reared its ugly head this time. And I think fans will know that Showtime and TGB, like you said, and Jamal tried. They tried
Mm-hmm.
very hard, and it could be a fight that we can see in the second half. All right, let's get to the fan questions, fun stuff. Jimmy Our Thing, one of my favorite followers on Twitter, was Mayweather signing for you with Showtime the single most satisfying moment of your career?
It was certainly up there. I would say, probably not surprisingly, actually seeing Mayweather Pacquiao come to fruition itself, because that was one that, through my career, I was involved with in all the various iterations. When I was outside counsel to Golden Boy in the original Top Rank negotiations way back in 2008, 2009, drafting the term sheet, and being in the middle of that negotiation and knowing how close we came in 2009 to that happening. And then, getting to, making a career transition and then being able to be part of bringing that to fruition, years later in 2015. I think just because as a fan, I was being tortured like everyone else was being tortured. But professionally, I spent a lot of time on it, and come close on multiple times. So to finally bring it home, I'd say that was the most satisfying thing.
Yeah, that was cool. That was a big moment. I mean, Showtime has a long history of these superstars coming over to Showtime, at the second half of their career, whether it was Tyson, Holyfield, and Mayweather was another one. I think it was 2013. He made that jump. I think it was after the Cotto fight.
Absolutely.
Yeah, Cotto fight was the last one.
Yeah, and there was it was tremendously satisfying because if you remember, in retrospect, everyone was like, "Oh yeah, obvious thing, obvious a great thing for the network." That was not sort of the reaction at the time that we signed the deal. There was a lot of negativity.
Yeah.
There was a lot of criticism and saying, "Look, what the hell is Showtime doing this for? This is silly. He's not going to fight that often. He doesn't have much left in the tank. This is desperation. This is not going to end well." Yeah. Could not have worked out better for him.
I would say so. Yeah, he went on quite a run after those two Maidana fights. I mean, were epic, and then obviously McGregor. Geez, talk about another one. Let's go to at Homer, another one of my favorite follows. I don't know how he has this handle. It's just Homer. How does someone make a transition from law practice into boxing or the TV space, or any advice for someone currently outside the boxing business interested in getting involved?
Look, for me, the transition was sort of being tangentially involved. The advice I would say, and it sort of was not that I was looking to transition over to boxing, but the lessons I take away from it is, if you're not exactly where you want to be, I think your job is to use your current situation and your current opportunities to the biggest extent that you can to get where you want to be. So I'm an entertainment attorney, and most of my work was film and TV, actors, writers, directors. But I had, again, through happenstance, I was representing both De La Hoya and Tyson as their lawyers. And it put me in a position to, because I knew the TV business and I knew the boxing business, thankfully there were some creative people at Showtime who were willing to take a risk on someone who had never worked at a TV network before.
Yeah.
But it was because I had utilized the opportunities I had to sort of be able to make a case for different opportunities. So it's sort of like, no, I'm not a sports attorney. No, I'm not a TV programmer, but I have exposed myself to the boxing business. I've exposed myself to the business of cable television. And then when I get into the room with someone, I can at least make a pitch and say, look, I haven't done exactly this, but look at all this other stuff I've done, which has prepared me to do this.
How long have you been at Showtime? Is it over 10 years?
It's almost exactly, I just passed my 10-year anniversary. Wow. It was 10 years in November.
Congrats. It's almost flew by. I feel like everything is just kind of flying by. But yeah, that was a big shakeup when that headline came through, and must be interesting to be Oscar's former lawyer. And now, for instance, this Munguia thing, that's got to be a nice little added wrinkle, right?
Yeah, it's the business is incestuous. Like, people move to different sides, and it's a small business. So look, I have nothing respect for those guys. What Oscar and Richard and Eric and others built with Golden Boy was really incredible to watch.
Yeah, I like Golden Boy. They put good fights together, and for the whole, I mean, they do a good job with that. AFC Steven says, what do you think of Conor McGregor these days, your buddy? Can you go one day without
you're just
connected to him?
They're just looking, they're just fishing for look, he is a tremendous personality. Yes. And I'll leave it there. Because the reality, look, okay, I'll take the bait.
There we go.
There's a narrative. Look, one thing that UFC does better than boxing is they have one cohesive messaging, because they have one large group. So there's the same message from the same people all the time. And their narrative is, okay, you always get the best fighting the best. That's not true.
Do they though?
Yeah. That's, if you're paying attention and thinking critically and rationally, no. It's not the best fighting the best. It's the best opportunity fighting the best opportunity for the UFC. So, if it was the best fighting the best, then Conor McGregor would no longer be getting title shots, because he's not. He hasn't proven to be the best, and he hasn't defended his titles successfully. He's not a guy who should be top of the list. But he is a guy who's top of the list in terms of salesmanship and visibility and, commercial appeal to some extent. And that's why he gets the opportunities. So, he's a great personality. He's got some more mileage left in him, and he sells fights. But you'd be hard pressed to defend it and say like that he's still an elite fighter who is worthy of the opportunities at the championship level.
Yeah. What is it? One win since 2016. The way I look at the UFC, it's like it isn't the best versus the best, and I get upset when I hear that too. But it's like I don't follow it very closely, but what I'm seeing is recycled matchups. I'm seeing a lot of recycled Masvidal, Covington. I'm like, didn't we see that already? We didn't, but it's just so many of it's the same matchups over and over. I think they're running out of stars. I like to, kind of chide my UFC followers that follow me too. I'm like, UFC wishes they had the amount of talent that was in boxing right now.
Yeah, I mean, look, Colby Covington is a really good example. He was going to get cut until he came up with a gimmick.
Oh,
the gimmick didn't make him a better fighter. Sure, he has gotten better over the years, but his fight style isn't significantly different than it was several years ago when he was on the verge of being cut. He just became more sellable. Mm-hmm. So he didn't become better. He became more sellable.
Well, the interesting thing with Covington is they said that like he had this whole moniker, which probably got him fights, but didn't make him any more money because they don't get upside on the pay-per-views.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Which I thought was interesting, but hey, it kept him from not getting cut. And
no, look, it put food on the table. So, kudos to him. He figured out how the system over there works, and it works better for you if you are a big personality. It's not about talent. It's about, commercial appeal. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Now that we're a couple of years removed from the McGregor Mayweather lead up, being on that stage, I mean, you're always going to be, it's just always going to be a thing. It's always going to be a thing for you, but like you handled it well. And I think as the further and further we get away from it, it's actually like, it's got to be funny for you, right?
Yeah, it was even funny at the time. Look, if you know me personally, that isn't in my nature to sort of sit and take it, but that was. Look, I'm not trying to, for me personally and professionally, like I don't need to be a storyline more than I already was. Like that, it's a distraction. I don't need to insert myself and become a major player and become a Vince McMahon style. And that's all that would have happened.
Let me see your strut. You got the billionaire strut. That's McGregor's.
So I'm not going to become Triple H, and. So it was sort of like, okay, weather the storm and continue to do the job. And
what a thrill, though. That was a thrill. That was a wild, wild time. I mean, we'll never forget that.
I think I can say with confidence, I don't think there's going to be another opportunity where I can walk into a stadium with 50,000 people and they're all booing me.
That's awesome.
I doubt that's going to happen again. But it was good to experience.
Never say never. Jake Paul, Conor McGregor. I mean, when is it happening? Jake Paul, Conor McGregor. I get asked about it all the time. I'm the boxing guy to my friends. I'm the boxing guy here. When's Jake Paul fighting McGregor? I mean, it's Showtime pay-per-view. Let's go.
Look, McGregor, Masvidal, the Diaz brothers. Look, that those are collisions of personalities, which would be thrilling. I mean, they're interesting fights as well, but with the promotion ability of those guys, there'd be phenomenal events.
Yeah, it would be. Yeah, I noticed something. Maybe this was a slippage. Maybe it wasn't. You said during the webinar, hopefully Jake Paul is back. Does that mean just hopefully he's just fights again, or hopefully he's with Showtime? What's the I would say the contract status.
He's got plenty of opportunities. We're talking to him. Look, he's certainly going to fight again. It may be with Showtime, and maybe with another platform. Look, we certainly want to continue doing business with him. There's a lot of suitors. He's got a lot of financial opportunities. And look, if someone is going to come along, and write a check, which is silly. Look, we've shown the ability, as painful as it is, that we're going to be disciplined about our deals, and it's got to make sense. So if people, the way that we've stayed in this business for 36 years is knowing what our business principles are. So if people are throwing around silly money, we don't need to match that. Now, I'm not saying that's happening with Jake or, the money that Jake makes are silly. It's, that would be the circumstance in which, we wouldn't continue with Jake if, he just got an offer somewhere else that didn't make sense for us to match.
Oh, so he's not like contractually obligated?
Correct.
Okay, that's cool. I mean, we've seen so many of these apps and stuff come out of nowhere. I feel like boxing fans are like, whether it's Famio or like some like these ones that are just like, where are these coming from? I mean, there's so many over the years. So I would not be surprised if Jake Paul got thrown in a ridiculous bag to fight. I don't think it's be Masvidal though. Didn't he re-signed the new deal, which is essentially like
that's the problem is they're a pretty long contractual commitments to UFC fighters, even retired fighters. So there's got to be the right combination of factors for something like that to come together.
I think Jake Paul McGregor is a can't miss. I mean, that is a fight that will make them boatloads of money. I would enjoy it. I think it would be great. I think Showtime being a part of it would be even awesome. I thought it was a savvy move getting him on Showtime. Okay, final question. This is a fan question from me.
Okay.
Are you Javon Bay on Twitter?
No,
who is Javon Bay?
Look, if I had a burner account, I'd like to think that I would run it better and a little bit more suspicion free. And I certainly, if it was me, I wouldn't have the ability to sort of banter back and forth with myself the way I am with Javon. So, who I've never met or never spoken to, by the way. But I do think that's funny. I do not have a burner account. I think anyone who's followed me for any amount of time should know that like I don't really need a burner account because I'm pretty candid.
Okay, so you're not Javon Bay and you don't have a burner account. Those are the two biggest snippets when I cut this interview up. That's what's going to be. I will say this about Javon Bay: the guy, whoever it is a pretty astute. They know the boxing business. So.
Absolutely, and they're paying a lot of attention to the landscape and sort of looking strategically at what everyone's doing.
All right, Steven, I appreciate the time. I'm looking forward to this Showtime rollout. I love Showtime. I love the whole broadcast team, everyone behind the scenes. Do a phenomenal job. And I like that Custer said, you're the friend of boxing. I really think that too. I think boxing fans, we're lucky to have someone like you that's passionate about boxing. And I look forward to seeing you at the Barclays Center.
Yeah, absolutely.
We didn't even get to that, May 28th.
I mean, look, I appreciate the kind words. That's the highest compliment that I could ever receive is for someone, whether when I'm gone or when I'm still here, to say, look, I helped elevate the sport because that's all I'm trying to do. And like you, I'm excited to be back at Barclays Center. Like it's a great venue and they bring out a great crowd. And
they bring out a lot of the weed smoke, the secondhand weed smoke in that arena.
Absolutely right.
Pungent. I'm gonna have to bring like something to block. I gotta count those punches. I can't be.
Yeah, absolutely. And now we're on the verge of legalized cannabis. It's gonna be even more.
We've seen Al get weed smoke blown in his face last year. Al Bernstein from Pete Davidson, which I can't even believe that's actually a sentence. So we need to keep the THC fumes away from Al. So we can maybe Mora. He might be into that. DJ Morrow back in the day. I appreciate the time, Mr. Espinoza, and big time boxing coming your way on Showtime. Thanks a lot.
Appreciate it.